And the truth is that we all have blind spots, all of us. It doesn't matter how many years you spend doing this work, you will always have a blind spot. And so having objective observers, people on the outside, consultants, coaches, mentors, uh, these are all incredibly valuable people who help. They like basically our job is just to hold up a mirror and help them see what they themselves can't see on their own. This is where you take this, like the awareness into action. So where you think this is the thing, you suddenly have an awareness, oh, there's more to this story. And how do I integrate the rest of that story into my reality? So that, I often joke, not joke, sorry, I often use the metaphors in my work. And I see it as, you're driving down the highway, and if you didn't have mirrors or, the new technology that sort of lets you know that there's something in your blind spot.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Tina Collins. Tina is a certified professional coach with over 25 years of experience guiding leaders and teams through transformation, challenge, and courageous conversations. She has collaborated with leaders across various sectors, including many government agencies, the armed forces, construction, energy, and finance, to help them communicate effectively, foster trust and psychological safety, and lead with authenticity, the foundation of long-term success. As the founder of Rethink Re, a leadership development firm, Tina takes a practical, human-centered approach to coaching and facilitation. She focuses on helping her high-achieving clients manage their inner perfectionists to move past self-criticism, doubt, unattainable standards, and burnout, transforming their inner drive into sustainable leadership. Her work emphasizes transforming awareness into action, fostering accountability, and creating space for leaders to show up with both clarity and self-compassion. Congrats on Rethink Re and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Well, thank you very much. That's quite an intro. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show because I do think there's this growing trend, as we were talking about before we started recording, of people realizing that they need to slow down and be more authentic. And I think a lot of that ties into letting go of the feeling like they have to be perfect all the time and show up as these perfect, polished, nothing's wrong, I'm an expert, everything's going well with me personas that have permeated social media for so long, especially. And so I'd love to hear about how you approach this, what you've seen work and not work for people as they're trying to navigate this transition back to a slower, more manageable pace.
Yeah, I as we were talking just before we hit record, I've noticed a substantial and substantive desire, like it's tangible, a real need to slow down. And I think there's also an appreciation that slowing down doesn't necessarily always mean earning less money. And so the scarcity mindset that I think most of us have, we all, unfortunately, banks do not accept hugs as mortgage payments. So the reality of our capitalist system is that we need to earn money in order to pay for the life that we desire. But there's always been this belief that in order for one to happen, you have to work like a crazy person. Just hustle and hustle harder. And I think we like to romanticize that, like both sides of that coin, that, if you work really hard, you can have the big house, all the trappings of a successful person. And I think there's also this romanticizing idea of giving it all up and living in the forest and growing your own food. But the reality is that like the vast majority of us, I would say like 99% of us are going to live in between in a healthy way. And so this is a beautiful, and especially the beginning of the year is a beautiful time. Most people just like add more to their plates. Like I'm going to add a workout. I'm going to add a diet. I'm going to like do all of these things to change my life. And I think definitely in my community, there's a reflection of like, what do I want less of? What do I need to step out of? What do I need to let go of? Because this culture that we've created, and we didn't necessarily design it and create it, but we definitely play a role in making it continue. I think a lot of us are waking up to this, like it's not sustainable and it's not healthy, and ultimately what is the sacrifice is our relationships, which impact our longevity. I mean, don't let me get into the studies of longevity because yes, there's a biological component, but over and over and over again, the best indicator of longevity and health is relationships.
Absolutely. For your personal life and professional life, the stronger the relationships, the healthier those lives are going to be. And yeah, I think the idea of adding more to people's lives in order to achieve this vision of what success is, which I think also that definition is changing in people's minds of how do I define success and what does success look like for me compared to what is but other people have told me success looks like, that people that you've bought into. But also then there's that, if you're going to take something on, what are you going to say no to, or what are you going to give up in order to make space for that and understand your own limitations and capacity? And there's this myth or like that you have to do more and more to be as successful as you want to be, and for businesses and individuals. But I always think back to when Steve Jobs was brought back into Apple to turn it around in the 90s. He didn't add more products. They had like 600 plus things. He cut it down to 4, and he simplified things. He said no to, and focused what they were doing in a way that they hadn't been for a long time. And then they rebounded from that. They probably need someone similar. I don't know if they can dig them up again to get them to come back and help with what they're struggling with now. But that kind of focus and saying no to things and cutting out the excess parts of what you're currently doing that aren't serving your bigger goals is actually a better step towards getting what you really want than just trying to pile on more to an already overloaded plate.
Yeah. I mean, having worked with organizations for over 25 years, we spent a lot of time strategizing. What are the priorities? And that's plural. And based on those priorities, what's the strategy to getting them? And what I've noticed after so many decades of helping organizations is that what trumps strategy all day is your vision. If you don't have a very clear vision that is well communicated, articulated, visible, felt, then it's chaos. You've got like all sorts of things happening at the same time. Over the holidays, I read Essentialism, a wonderful book, and I cannot remember the author's name right now, which is not great. But one of the things that I learned in that book is that the word priority only became pluralized in the 90s.
Yep.
And I love this idea. I mean, I love words and I love etymology. So I love the idea that we should have a priority, one priority. I mean, if that's the lens in which we look at life, oh my Lord, now we have to be really critical, very discerning. reflective. Like, this is the hard work. And of course, then in the 90s, they pluralized it so that we can have multiple priorities, which in itself is hilarious, because then if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority.
It's a one-word oxymoron.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's a good way of putting it. Hmm.
So when you're working with people and helping them change what they've currently been doing and getting transforming their awareness into action and fostering accountability and making all these changes to help them be more successful, what are some of the first steps you take them on? It sounds like figuring out what their vision really is, because a lot of times it seems like they're kind of stumbling around in the dark, especially if they're a leader and they don't have a clear vision and their team doesn't really know what to do. So how do you help them find that vision to kick things off? Or is there another step before identifying the vision that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, before vision, I want to know who you are, or at least who you think you are. You can only expand to your level of awareness, and that has a ripple effect elsewhere. So if, let's say, your dream is to have $1 million business, but you don't believe that it's possible, or because your subconscious is telling you, like, I don't have what it takes, I don't have the stamina, I don't have the discipline, I don't have the education, I don't have the certifications. If there's any part of you that is doubting that ability, it is a Sisyphean task. Like, it is pushing a boulder uphill to get to that $1 million, because subconsciously you don't believe it's possible. And so we start off with self-awareness, and also, how are you showing up? This really matters. I work with a lot of leaders who believe they show up one way, and it's constantly bumping up against reality. And then they wonder why they struggle with their team. They wonder why they struggle making decisions, why they struggle to get not necessarily consensus, but buy-in. And it's because there's an aspect of their personality that is not fully aware of how it's showing up. And the truth is that we all have blind spots. All of us. It doesn't matter how many years you spend doing this work, you will always have a blind spot. And so having objective observers, people on the outside, consultants, coaches, mentors, these are all incredibly valuable people who help. Basically, our job is just to hold up a mirror and help them see what they themselves can't see on their own. This is where you take this, like, the awareness into action. So where you think this is the thing, you suddenly have an awareness, oh, there's more to this story. And how do I integrate the rest of that story into my reality? So that, I often joke, not joke, sorry, I often use the metaphors in my work. And I see it as, you're driving down the highway, and if you didn't have mirrors, or the new technology that sort of lets you know that there's something in your blind spot, if you were driving down the highway and you didn't have mirrors or anything to tell you, like, hey, there's something in your blind spot, you would have to drive slowly to avoid bumping into things, or you would bump into things and crash. And you laugh because we've seen both, right? We've seen people who play super cautiously and stay super small because they don't want to bump into things. Or we see reckless leaders just plowing through, crashing into things, destroying teams, all because they don't have access to their blind spots. And that's basically what coaches and I call it objective observers. Our job is to stand and allow you to see what you can't see, so that you can go as fast as you want You can make faster decisions. You don't bump into other people or other things. You know, that's basically the analogy that of our work.
I really like that because, I can envision people on the road who are going super slow and super cautious, and it's frustrating because they could obviously have the potential to go a lot faster, but they don't see it in themselves. They have that mental block. And then you see the people that are weaving in and out of traffic and they're slamming on the brakes and they're zooming around, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you're going to kill yourself and other people if you don't drive more carefully. And and then you look at what happens when people actually drive sanely, and people get where they're trying to go, and they're successful, and they arrive on time, and it's a lot more pleasant, and you're not like getting out of the car every time with like white knuckles and like heart palpitations from all the stress. And it's a much more enjoyable experience for everyone involved. And it's funny how well that translates to the business world, where people are either getting home from work and they're just like hypertension, and they're gonna have and they're super stressed and they're freaking out, or they're just bored out of their minds because they feel like they're not achieving anything worthwhile. And then there's this finding that healthy medium and having the right team and tools and relationships for people that can show you what you don't know, but is creeping up on your blind spot. And if you don't have someone who can show you the way, show you that obstacle, then you're have a lot less chance of getting to your destination safely. That's amazing analogy. I love it. So what are some of the examples of like teams you've worked with where they've made these changes, and what are some of the results of working on these things with you?
Well, I mean, if we stick with the analogy of driving, so when people become more aware of what's in their blind spots and they're able to speed up, slow down, change lanes, do all of the things, what ends up happening is flow, ease. You know, like traffic is able to move, like you're able to get to your destination safely, on time, without crashing or spending more money. Like all of these things happen. And I've seen that, like using that same analogy in my teams. I've worked with teams, this is not an exaggeration. I've worked with a team on day one. We all sat around the boardroom, and most of them wouldn't even look up, just look at other people in the boardroom. They were completely disassociated and refusing to engage in what we were doing. There was zero trust, zero psychological safety, arguably virtually no self-awareness. I mean, it honestly, I entered this scenario thinking, I don't know if I can even do this. This is probably the worst I've ever seen. And also my heart ached because this is the environment in which they work. They have to spend 8 hours a day with a group of people that cause them to literally shut down. The impact on your health cannot be underestimated. So it took us several sessions just to develop trust in me. Like I wasn't asking them to trust each other because I knew that was a long shot. But it was like trust me to move us just like 1 degree into the future. We worked through a variety of what I would consider quite shallow exercises because we wanted to develop trust. And after 3 sessions, the conversations became a little more deep. And what was really fun was that, well, they also started looking at each other. That was a huge win. But also they started challenging each other's thoughts and ideas, which is an indicator of psychological safety, which I thought, okay, game on, like we're in this now, we're going for it. We used several practices. So one was the group coaching, or the team coaching. We would bring everybody together to work on a common objective. And then we would break into individual coaching. And then I call this an accordion process, where I get to observe them as a team. I guide them through an exercise. Team building is the secondary benefit. What we're doing is actually moving the organization forward. And in doing so, we're building a team. It's a twofer. It's not trust falls and that kind of thing. We're actually doing real work for the organization. The team benefits, and I'm also paying attention to what's happening individually. And then we take those individual experiences into our personal one-on-one coaching. And in the one-on-one coaching, things were revealed like, and I'm not going to reveal any names, but I remember there was one conversation where the woman said, I walked into her office and she showed me the palm of her hand, and that was it. Like, I just knew she was not somebody I could talk to. I couldn't count on her. And so this woman had developed an entire narrative around this person's attitude towards her, and also her own personal value. That, like, I'm obviously not worthy of this person's time. She developed this entire story, which, when you tell your brain something, your brain looks for evidence to support it. And so for years, she just kept looking for the evidence to support this idea that she was of low value and that this person didn't like her. And in our personal coaching, I challenged that hard. And what ended up happening, so I was very, very lucky. We got to work with this team for an entire year. So I got to see the progression, the check-ins, the growth. And I kid you not, at the end of the year, there was a couple of things that were really quite funny. I always show up with food to my group work. People, it's actually science. People are happier when they have some level of sugar, and that is in the form of fruit or donuts or whatever. And so I always show up with something so that people can snack while we're working through things. And at the end of this year, the CEO, who had a really great sense of humor, he said to me, I think you might be the highest paid donut deliverer in Canada. Because what ended up happening is that I would show up with snacks and I could just sit back and observe. I was no longer leading. I was no longer doing any of the heavy lifting. They were doing it all on their own. And our very last meeting, if I had told them a year earlier, in a year from now, you're going to be sitting next to the person you dislike most, and you're going to be laughing, sharing jokes, being vulnerable with each other, they would have said no, never. What I entered was exactly 180 than what I exited. And it was extraordinary. The CEO, after our very last session, he sent me a beautiful message, and he ended it with, "We are just better people because of you."
That's so awesome. I can't think of a better way to end the show there. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, Tina. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a comment, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Tina, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.